What I'm going to be speaking about today is very deep. I wrote about 3 books so far, over 600 pages, and I'm going to try to kind of fit this all into this talk. So it's going to be a lot of information, but it's so deep that it's really the greatest conspiracy of civilization. Have you ever heard of the game Broken Telephone? Where, okay, you have people standing in a line up in a room and you give up one person a sentence at the beginning and they whisper it to the person in front of them. By the time it gets to the end, that sentence is completely changed, right? So this is how I like to describe our history and our ancient texts, is that we have to go back in time to find our truth. We have to go back in time to understand where this information came from. What was the mindset? What was the objection? What was the purpose of trying to describe these ancient texts, artworks, megalithic structure? What was the intention behind it? And today we look with our modern mind, our modern information, and we try to put our own perspective on what these things meant. And then when we start to discover, let's say, like the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, the Sumerian tablets, we start to read these stories from their personal words and their personal perspective. And then we also put our modern day interpretations on top of it. So for the past 20 years, I've been down the rabbit hole of a lot of different conspiracies. My favorite thing is mysticism and going into ancient sacred texts. And so this work is an accumulation of that knowledge. And I still think I need to write about 3 or 4 more books just to explain it better. So with that being said, we have a lot to go through, and I'll try to get through it all. But I'll start with this quote by a person that I look up to, which is Manly P. Hall. And he said that when the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. And, we're all living in a time right now where there's chaos, and it's over belief systems, ideologies, ancient texts, traditions. And if we knew what these ancient texts were really trying to say and what they were trying to transmit down to the generations, it would solve a lot of the world's problems. So it's almost like we're under a spell today. We're so off the track of the original messaging that hopefully this information will start to break down that spell that's been cast over humanity. So today's lecture is, did our ancestors possess a secret knowledge so valuable that it laid the foundational blueprint of the first civilizations? From Neolithic stone carvings, clay idols, petroglyphs, cuneiform numbers, and alphabets, how was this secret knowledge that we're going to discuss today passed down through thousands of years, thousands of generations into our modern times? And who was the original teachers of this lost knowledge, this lost language of the gods, stars, suns, planets, moon, and the earth? And the Gates of the Anunnaki in the presentation today is going to explore these mysteries hidden within the Sumerian tablets, mystical texts, motifs, symbolism, numbering system, sacred geometry, to unveil this ancient knowledge of heaven and earth. And it is through these principles that the ancient mystics sought to understand the mysteries of creation and the hidden mind that manifest it all into being. So this is a very deep subject. And our area of focus is the ancient Levant, which covers Mesopotamia, Persia, Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. You have Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Sinai, Giza in Egypt. And the interesting thing about this area is that it was inhabited since the Neolithic time. So going back all the way to Göbekli Tepe, Karhan Tepe, we're going back 11,000 BC. going back 9,000 BC. So we're going to the earliest stages. And that in itself, if who's heard of Göbekli Tepe? Okay. If you go back 12,000 years, there is megalithic stone structures, megalithic buildings 12,000 years ago with beautiful mosaics designed into it. Now, if you go further south into Mesopotamia, where you go to the Hassana tribes, the Samara, the Halef, the Ubaid cultures, they had mud brick, clay, and pottery. So think about that. The society that came before them had megalithic stone buildings, and then thousands of years after, we're back to mud bricks. Okay? Doesn't really make sense. But it's in the southern Ubaid region, which is in ancient Sumer. This is where the first cities of the Sumerians first were established, and the dates of them are very impressive. So Eridu, which is the first city of Sumeria, was 5400 BC. That's like 7,500 years ago was this first city in ancient Sumeria, right off the Persian Gulf, Idiru. Kind of sounds like Eden, right? Idiru. And the next one, which is the official city of ancient Sumeria, which is Uruk, is 4,500 BC. That's 6,500 years ago. And that city is the official city that birthed the first civilization. Okay, so we're really going back. We're going to before Egypt. We're going to before most cultures around the world, to the very first civilization that we know of. And I just want to jump into a quote from the Bible, which is in Genesis, which talks about this area in particular. The Bible is, especially the Old Testament, is always talking about Babylon. They're talking about Mesopotamia. They're talking about ancient Sumer. And this is one of the stories, which is Genesis 11, 1-9. Now the whole world had one language and one common speech. Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. As if one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them over the earth, and they stopped building the city. So this is a very interesting depiction of these people who spoke one language. It was a group of people. The whole earth spoke one language, and that one language they could do anything. The tower follows the same motif as the fall of the Garden the Garden of Eden. So once man and women ate the forbidden fruit, they gained knowledge of good and evil. And if they ate of the fruit of life, they would live forever and be like gods. To prevent humans from reaching a godlike potential, they were kicked out of the garden. The tower follows the same theme. Humans ascend a tower to reach the heavens, and God prevents that from happening. Babel in Hebrew translates to confuse, as in to confuse their language. But if you take the name Babel and put it into ancient Akkadian, which is the original language of this, we get a very different translation. Babilu translates to gate of the gods. And this is the source of both the words Babel and Babylon. So Babylon was the gate of the gods, and the tower represents the Sumerian ziggurats. These are towers that house the gods, connecting heaven and earth, which were astrological observatories and a potent symbol of the axis Mundi, the sacred mountain or hill ascending to the heavens. So this is all ancient symbology that I'll explain. And here's a boundary stone from Babylon. And these are the gates of the gods. So they have these boundary stones and symbols, and you can see that there's these little houses, right? And each house represents a different god. And their symbol is usually on top of the house, or on top of the gate, or an animal or a person next to the gate. There was a singular language that was spoken by our ancestors that was lost when human populations were scattered around the world after a flood or a cataclysm. Is there evidence of this language hidden throughout ancient cultures? A language that gave humans knowledge to achieve anything they set their minds to. Then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. So, who were the Sumerians? There is actually no consensus to who the Sumerians were or where they came from. Where did they originate from? There's a couple theories, and one theory is that the Sumerians arrived around 5400 BCE from the Persian Gulf and settled on the land, which was the first site of the first city, which is Eridu. Then there's also theories that the Sumerians came from the region of the northern Kush Mountains, and they traveled down the Euphrates River, and they settled on the shore of Eridu. And we don't know if the Sumerians were a cultural mix between an unknown group of people and the original Ubaid culture who lived in that southern Mesopotamia for thousands of years before the Sumerians. And then why is the Sumerians so important? It is our earliest reference to modern civilization. They're the first society to develop a written language, which is called cuneiform. They created the first numbering system based on the number 60, which we still use today. They recorded the first calendar systems. They mapped the stars and the constellations. They're the earliest civilization to have written records and earliest recordings of the gods, cultural, religion, history, and myths. So now that we have access to all these tablets, we can actually go back to the roots of these very, very ancient myths and stories, religious and cultural beliefs, and we can compare these earlier writings to what has survived today. And we can trace all this knowledge back to Summer. You know, why is a circle 360 degrees? Because that's the numbers the Sumerians chose as the perfect number. Why do we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes to an hour? It was the Sumerians who discovered this, and we still use this today. So our modern society is still based on these things that were created thousands of years ago by this culture. So I'd like to talk about the gods and the hierarchy of creation. And I'm going to take a very, very different view than the ancient alien theory. All right. And the hierarchy of the gods and the goddesses found in the earliest accounts of Sumerian sacred text reflect a cosmological order of creation that attempts to explain the natural and supernatural forces experienced in the world. These early accounts personified each god or goddess to a specific force of nature, element, planet, star, attribute, or function that created, influenced, or governed life. So the gods were an accumulation of properties, accumulation of natural forces that were like, each god was like an encyclopedia of knowledge that described creation. And in ancient Sumeria, ancient Akkadian, ancient Babylonian, there is one main hierarchy of the gods. And it starts out with Abzu and Tiamat. And this is like the primeval waters, the dark abyss, the primordial sea, the waters of chaos. So basically, it's a world of nothingness. And then from nothingness and darkness and chaos, you get an awakening of these two gods, Anshar and Kishar, which is the primordial heavens and the primordial earth. And from the primordial heavens and earth, you get the birth of two gods, Anu, which is the god of the sky, and Ki, which is the goddess of the earth. Now, the children of Anu and Ki are the Anunnaki. So this is where the word Anunnaki comes from. It's the children of the sky and the children of the earth. And from Anu and Ki, you get Enlil, which is the god of air, Ninlil, his wife, consort, goddess of fates, Enki, god of water, Ninhursag, goddess of fertility, Ninurta, god of agriculture, Nana, god of the moon. Nana is very interesting because